Hello, New York. Thank you, everyone, for being here. My name is Blake Bettner. Thank you for being a part of Windup Watch Fair. I hope you're all having a great time. Let me know if you get Zach. Can you hear me? Okay. I'm really excited about this panel today. We are going to be talking about niche audiences, how we think about our audiences, how we find our audiences, how that changes as we grow, mature, change. So I'm excited about my panelists today. All four of these people I think are doing really interesting and brilliant things. I'll introduce myself really quickly. I am Blake Bettner. I'm the managing editor of Worn & Wound. Lead the great editorial team there. Hopefully you visit Worn & Wound from time to time for your watch review needs. That's enough from me. I'm going to let you guys introduce yourselves. You can say as little or as much as you'd like. And you can let us know what is on your wrists. I think we've got a few double wristers here on the panel. Jason, I'm going to start with you, buddy.
Awesome. Thank you. Can everyone hear me okay? All right, excellent. My name is Jason Gong. I'm the founder and CEO of a community and platform called Complecto, which is focused on increasing diversity, inclusion, and accessibility within the watch collecting community and the industry more broadly. By way of background, I have about 20 years of experience in corporate diversity, equity, and inclusion practices everywhere from Wall Street to Silicon Valley. And so I saw a lot of the same kind of opportunities that I was trying to solve for in the corporate world around creating more opportunities and more access for folks from underrepresented and marginalized communities. A lot of those same types of opportunities in this industry and in this hobby. And so that's what Complecto was born out of. My selfish desire to build the kind of community that I wanted to be a part of and share with others. So excited to be here. Thank you.
What are you wearing?
Oh, what I'm wearing. Yes. So on the left wrist, I've got a ceramic Daytona 116-500 Panda. On my right wrist, I'm wearing a Seiko Prospex SNR 027, the Landmaster. So black coated titanium, spring drive. This is like my zombie apocalypse watch. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. And John, how are you? Welcome.
Good. That's a hard act to follow. I'll leave the zombie apocalypse topic for later. My name's John McConico. I am an Oakland, California-based owner of Bespoke Watch Projects, a 9-year-old brand, one-man brand. My background, I've been a creative director, fine artist, product designer in the past, and been a long-time watch collector for about 25 years. So one day I woke up and said, what would it take to make my own watch? Which is a kind of an interesting question to ask yourself. But fast forward a few years, and now I have a growing collection. I do my own in-house styles. I incorporate a lot of, I would say, unconventional processes into my watchmaking, fine art processes, things from my past, such as architecture, furniture design, different things into the watchmaking process. And I do a lot of collaborative work. So my name Bespoke is a key component of that. Half of my customers, I'm making pretty much ready-made pieces. So they have options. Half of my customers, I do this kind of collaborative experience of working with them like an architect would in building a house, but essentially a watch. So for me, it's that human interaction that's a big part of my business. I would say that kind of really separates me from a lot of watch companies, because the reason I do it is because of those relationships. And part of those relationships, just I think everyone on this panel, I've always been about inclusion and really about, I think, promoting kind of watch, kind of our watch affliction that we all have to people who really don't necessarily know a lot about it, who are aspirational collectors, a lot of people who assume that watches aren't for them. So for me, inclusion, diversity has always been a big part of what I do, even outside of before this in design. And I'm bringing that into the watchmaking part of it. So that's my long-winded story. I'm the only person up here to be doing a single wrist today, but I'm wearing my new Intaglio 38, which is a svelte 38 millimeter case with one of my handmade dials. All of my dials are engraved, so they're very kind of tactile. I should have put on another watch today, but I have many at my booth.
No, they come in a lot of great options. Our Zach Kazan over there just took a hands-on look at a broad selection. You can go to Worn & Wound to
Great plug.
to see that exactly. And thank you, John. In Abingdon, welcome to the panel.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me okay? No.
Not great.
Up. Try this. How about this one? All right. So we'll switch that one out. My name is Abingdon Mullen out of Las Vegas, Nevada. I was originally born in England, so if I go back to England, my accent will come right back out. But here, I speak like a good Yankee. So I started a watch company 15 years ago after looking for a pilot's watch for women, and they didn't make any. Why did I want a pilot's watch for women? Because I'm also a pilot. I got my pilot's certificate in 2006. I fly about 80 different airplanes up to the Airbus and the Boeing 747. And one of the things that we often do with timepieces is we get them to commemorate moments in our life. And so that was such a big moment for me because I was anticipating a phenomenal career as a pilot. And I then found that there was nothing in the watch world. And I wanted one so badly that I built a company around it. Many of the girlfriends and colleagues that I have in aviation hadn't found anything. And the thing that they said, which really just struck me, was, oh no, they're never going to make anything for us. We're not big enough of a market. That is true when you only think about the 28,000 female pilots that are in the country, because that's all the number it is. Half of that is only a student pilot. So if you get at the airline level that I'm at, you're less than 5,000. We're definitely not a market. When we talk about niche, that's about as niche as you can get. But then what I discovered is that so many of those same women that are flying airplanes are racing cars, are scuba diving, are wanting purpose-built and tactical tool watches that have never been made for them. So if you look at a pie of niches of all these different women that are doing these things, that's what we create watches for. So 15 years is going to be on November 3rd. Of making watches, and we have 37 different watches that we brought to the show. Everything from a 35 millimeter, 200 meter automatic. We're using Swiss, Japanese, and American movements. And we have watches with compasses, flight computers, 3 time zone watches. Swiss, Japanese, and American movements. Sapphire crystals are standard. Think of like a Cartier or a Michael Kors meets a Swiss Army knife, and that's what we're making. And the women that are wearing these watches, we kind of discovered that they haven't still yet found many options in other brands. So we have over a 40% repeat purchase rate. So if you do know anything about like the business side of watches, that's a very good number. And it's built a community that we've just embraced. I mean, most of my customers, there's many of them here today in the audience supporting me. And we're live on Instagram because we are so involved with our community, and that's really what's built our brand.
Beautiful, thank you, Abingdon. What are you wearing on your wrist today?
Well, I'm wearing an Abingdon watch on each wrist. So, but this one is my good luck charm. This is one of the original prototypes. It's a Jackie, and this is a 42 millimeter Miyota FS20 sapphire pearl dial. 64 stones around the bezel, flight computer watch. And then we have our newest watch, the Nadia, which is automatic, 200 meter, it's a Seiko TMI, and also a sapphire crystal and full luminosity all the way down. So that's
Awesome, thank you.
Yep.
Max.
Hi, I'm Max. I am one of the co-founders of watchcrunch.com. So I got into watches back in the day when I was going to school, and somebody made fun of my diesel. I took it well, as criticism goes, and then I sort of turned around and said, "Well, teach me," and he said, "Go get a Seiko." So then I was off into the rabbit hole. But sort of towards the beginning of the pandemic, some of us sort of watch enthusiasts got together, and we kind of looked at the, talking about community and how to build community and communicate better with each other. And we felt like the existing platforms online just were a bit underwhelming for different reasons. You may have your own preferences, but for us, things like Reddit, Watch You Seek, Instagram, all sort of had their drawbacks as far as how well they were able to foster conversations around watches. And so, we amongst us, we had some people that were talented in computer programming, and others who, were watch dealers and such. And so we sort of put our heads together, and we decided we could probably do something better than what's out there. And so we didn't really know what the reception was going to be, but we sort of followed, our instincts, and just said if we build something that we like to use, that maybe other people will as well. So we're coming up on 1 year after launch of watchcrunch.com. And if you haven't checked it out, there's thousands of watch enthusiasts, lots of topics. And the idea is to have a modern platform that really combines the best of all the things that I talked about, where we can have positive conversations. And, a lot of the complaints about the traditional forums were some of the toxicity, the sort of the rejection of people who might be newer to the hobby, people getting turned off after one post, and getting flamed, right? And so through both sort of algorithmic means and also having kind of policing by the community itself, we've managed to kind of keep that at bay. It's a constant work in progress, obviously. But we have a lot of very watch-specific features. So rather than taking some existing template and just making it for watches, when you build something from the ground up, dedicated for watches, then you can build in features that are watch-specific. So for example, if you go to watchcrunch.com, you'll see there's a specific kind of lateral scroll bar for what are you wearing today, and that refreshes every day. There is specific. Like we launched a meetup feature where you can host a meetup in your city, and we've had people in the UK, in the Bay Area, and then we just had one last night, which Blake was there. And so it's all about just how to get people together, how to connect us who have this weird, strange little hobby that nobody else understands. And so we're continuing to grow. We love working with Windup and Worn and Wound because I feel like we have a very similar vibe. It's sort of grassroots, it's enthusiasts, and it's sort of, the watch I'm wearing is a Laurier, and it's it's a sort of a 1016 homage, like a vintage Explorer homage. And just watching these little companies kind of grow up around the enthusiast community has been really inspiring. So yeah, check it out. The app is coming out probably next month.
You heard it here. Okay, it's official now. Next month the app is coming out. Thank you all for your introductions. Let's dive in to this. I like having. I like this group up here because you each represent kind of a traditional, really important facet, an important facet of the hobby. From enthusiasts and communities to their expanding constituents to the watches themselves. I'm curious to hear from you guys. How do you balance the desire to reach a specific target audience, your niche, with an awareness of a constantly changing and diverse base of consumers and enthusiasts? And how does one affect the other? John, do you want to start? Do you want to lead us off?
Sure, I'll dive in. So like I said earlier, for me, it's been this very personal relationship. So I kind of came into, even though I've always been into watches and I've always had one foot in the watch community to a certain degree, when I started the brand, and it kind of happened organically in those projects, it really was more of a one-to-one relationship. So outside of the watch community, I was doing other events. I was doing pop-ups. I was doing art and design events that were non-watch related. And then I started acquiring customers and just started talking to folks in smaller groups. So it was kind of this very one-to-one relationship, very small scale. And I found that as things have progressed and as I became kind of more involved formally in the watch community as a brand and not as a collector or a person, I'm still a person, but a different person, an evolving person. As that evolved, it really was the same thing. So I think that's something that probably is common with a lot of independent brands and all of us here, is that it's not forgetting that a person is not a demographic, a person is not a prospect or profile. They're a person with passion, they're a person with wants and needs, and for the most part, people are not heard enough. And I think that is something that I constantly remembered. So as I've grown, it's maintaining that real personal kind of relationship with folks. And if it's someone walking up to my booth, if it's someone emailing me tonight, if it's someone that I've known for years, it's kind of treating a person with respect. Because, I think as brands, we can't really expect that in return unless you actually give that first. So there's a certain kind of barrier I think you break with any customer, any relationship, where you have to kind of break through that first layer, and then you feel like you really have this natural flow, natural conversation, And I think a lot of what I'm hearing too, what you just said, I mean, I think a lot of that's starting to happen online, or hopefully. And it's kind of like, as the online communities mature, then we're realizing that you really need to break through that and have that really genuine communication. And you know, brands who do that, you know, like you find your niche and you know how to speak to people and you know how to be inclusive, then I think you see a different kind of growth than a lot of brands who tend to have that very kind of standoffish, you know, layer. So for me specifically, I would say that it's kind of not losing sight of that kind of boots on the ground, grassroots approach, direct relationship, genuine conversation, and you allow for that conversation to come back to you. I think it's always, you don't want to talk to a person or at a person, you want to actually allow that conversation to come back. And then I think it's much more rewarding for the brand also.
And Jason, as a representative of the other side of that equation, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, so complecto is a Latin word, and it means to welcome, to include, and to embrace. And when I think about what's very unique and I think compelling about the community and what we're building is that it isn't really that niche, because who we're trying to reach is any and everyone that shares our vision for a more diverse and inclusive watch collecting community and industry, right? And more spaces where folks feel like there's a lower barrier to entry, there's less intimidation, there's less pretense, there's more opportunity to come and learn and connect with folks that also enjoy the hobby, right? But are across a very broad spectrum of experience levels when it comes to collecting, right? And their overall level of knowledge. And so I say all that to say that, you know, I think that the real opportunity, right, is to look for ways to be more inclusive and engage more folks, right? I think the total addressable market, right, for folks who can really love watches and buy watches is exponentially larger, right, than the current market of folks who are purchasing them, even over the last couple of years, right, as we've seen the market explode. But I think there historically haven't really been a ton of attempts made by the industry as a whole to really reach out and engage folks, especially those from underrepresented and marginalized communities. And so, you know, when I think the industry kind of looks at different markets, I think there's this tendency to do so in a very monolithic way, right? There are men who buy watches, women who buy watches, China and the Middle East, right? But it's so much more nuanced than that globally, and especially here in the United States. And so I say all that to say that, you know, leaning into the inclusion component is a way to unlock a ton of potential value, right? That you haven't really been able to focus on or maybe been cognizant of.
Yeah. Abingdon, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Oh, absolutely. So because I'm just like, yes, yes, yes on everything you just said. A lot of people have been very surprised to see us at this event as a watch event, because this is the first watch event we've ever been to in 15 years of having a watch company. And the reason being is because we were going to air shows and car shows and dive shows and those adventure and outdoor shows and all of those industries where there's not necessarily watch collectors, but they just don't know it yet. And they're not going to know it unless you'd expose the industry to them. So it's great that we're all preaching to our choir because we all speak the same language. But when you start speaking to somebody outside your choir, then you build your choir. So that's what we've been doing for the last 15 years, and I am incredibly humbled by the customers that own 6, 7, 8 watches that have never owned a watch before. And if we can reach more people, like you were just saying, then we're going to be creating more collectors, which in essence creates more watch nerds, which makes us all much more happier because we can have these incredible conversations about movements and design and cases and all these things. And then when you were talking about how that one-on-one relationship works with just getting the feedback from the person that you're building for, well, that's what people always ask me when they ask me, are you designing the watches? I said, no, it's my customers that design the watches. They tell me what they want to see. A ton of flight attendants came up to me one time 8, 9 years ago and said, we would love to see 3 time zones on a watch. We've seen it on these really big men's watches. Can you put it on a woman's watch? Yeah, I'll figure that out. And then I can just make it look beautiful and work with their uniforms for work because they all have those uniform standards. And that's how you can build a quality product that people are going to want, that they're going to want to wear, and they didn't even realize they were a watch collector yet. They just need the product to be built for them, so they need to be heard.
I think having the right impression as you come into this hobby can make such a huge difference. And that's where Max, your community Watch Crunch has really blossomed into an active enthusiast hub with real positive and accepting tone. How did you foster this type of environment for both seasoned and underrepresented enthusiasts?
Yeah, I think you guys really kind of covered the gamut of how to bring people in, and our perspective is, when we first launched, we had to have a lot of conversations about how to kind of tailor and manicure the content that is all user generated, right? And one of the conversations was really surrounding this idea of quote unquote newbies, right? Because we all know how newbies are treated on a traditional forum. And I think it turns off a lot of people who are trying to get into the hobby, who are new, who are just trying to learn. And if you get told to go away or go read the frequently asked questions, you may never come back. And so, we were kind of throwing around different ideas of, well, do we create a section where we like cordon them off so that they don't offend, people who are more seasoned? And then we decided, that's not the right approach, right? That's not sort of what the ethos of what we're trying to do as far as inclusion. So we just decided that it's okay if the same topic comes up every other week. That we would take a bit of a algorithmic approach to this, kind of taking hints from, the sort of the existing successful. If you think about YouTube, right, it kind of understands where you are, what you like, sort of what depth you want. Everything, whenever you rely on an algorithm, there's always going to be negative things, unanticipated consequences, and we're constantly tweaking that. But I think the take-home point is we decided that what we want is for there will be people who chime in regardless if the question was just asked 2 days ago, and if that gets served to the right sort of demographic, and we can sort of figure out how to channel it correctly, that it will serve the people who are trying to learn. And then maybe if you are, like if you know all about movements, then and you're interested in that topic, maybe you'll get more of that content. And so really trying to nurture new users, I think is a big conversation that we have, and make them feel welcome, and make them come back and want to learn more about the hobby.
It feels like we're kind of trying to foster an environment where brands that traditionally prize exclusivity can kind of shift into more of an inclusive model. Jason, I know that's something that you have a lot of insight on and can be helping brands doing. What more could they be doing to foster that?
Yeah, so I think a really great example, right? Probably the best example that we've seen in the watch industry was when the Moon Swatch came out, right? You have this big prestigious brand like Omega partnering with Swatch, which everyone probably in this building has owned at least one Swatch in their lifetimes, right? It's where a lot of us start in the hobby. It's where I started in the hobby. And when they merged, right, to create this incredible product, they took something that's really aspirational for a lot of folks. And frankly, a lot of people will never be able to afford or will never be able to rationalize spending $5,000 or $6,000 on a Speedmaster, right? But now all of a sudden, that thing became accessible to folks, right? And I thought that was a really great example of, this attempt to democratize access, right, to watches in a way that we haven't seen from brands before, taking something so iconic, right, and so historically significant, and making it accessible to the masses. And just look at how many people turned out and wanted one, right? So many people that would not have otherwise maybe considered themselves watch people or collectors or enthusiasts. I mean, people were like trampling over one another to try to get into Swatch stores to get their hands on one. And they're still really tricky to get their hands on, right? And so I think that's a really great example of like leaning into creating opportunities and spaces to make your products more accessible and more appealing to broader audiences. And so what more can brands be doing? More of that. Right? More connecting with communities in a grassroots way. More of, coming to events like what you guys are putting on here with Windup, right? More opportunities to connect with communities like mine, like Complecto, where we can facilitate dialogue between these communities and the brands to really understand What do you care about? What's important? What do you value? Right? And where is their alignment with what a brand's trying to achieve? And how do you tap into that synergy in a meaningful and authentic way?
Any of you guys have any thoughts on this, on that particular response, the Omega Moon Swatch in particular?
I think he nailed that.
Yeah.
I agree. I think it's one of the best examples of a brand bringing in just an entirely new audience. And it's important that all brands keep doing that.
I really enjoyed the emotional roller coaster that we all went through days following that release and watching the trampling that was happening. I made a video about it on our channel, and I try to take four objective perspectives on it. Particularly as somebody who owns a Speedmaster Professional and who loves a Speedmaster. I think it did offend some people, and it exposed just some of the snootiness around watch collecting, right? Just people's reactions immediately saying, "Oh, that's not a real Speedmaster. Go get your toy out of here," But I think your point is really good. Is there is a watch for everyone, and we're on different parts of our journey. And even if you see it as a mistake, you've made plenty of mistakes yourself. Right, and you learn from that, and it's all the good and the bad. It's just all part of the experience. And I wouldn't want to have loved every single watch I bought, because I wouldn't be the collector I am. So I think just having enough empathy from the top for people to who see watches in different ways, have different budgets. And maybe don't share your perspective.
Yeah. Speaking of a watch for everybody, John, your brand, especially your made-to-order editions, present a unique opportunity for enthusiasts. How do you define your audience, and what approach do you take to reaching them, given that they are kind of one-of-one people?
Yeah, that's an ever-evolving thing. So, what's interesting is what I find, I still have a presence at non-watch related events. Again, I try to be out there as much as I can and sleep occasionally. But, again, having that kind of presence and having those conversations is extremely important to me. And I tend to be a people person, so I really enjoy that part of it. And I find that the more activity around that, the more engagement, and I think you spoke to your repeat customers and that relationship, I find that that's a huge part of my business. There have been people that I've become friends with over the last few years and made multiple pieces for. So I really describe it as I'm an architect for the wrist, and it's a relationship of building that house for them that happens to be a watch. And if I'm in town or if they're local, then I'll have a beer or coffee with them, and it becomes part of the process. Likewise, I think the audience, in inclusivity, it's something I've always been conscious of. And even from the very, very beginning, when I did my first photo shoots, I was lucky enough, and this is a plug, my wife has a clothing line. It's a women's clothing line. We're both designers, and we've actually done joint shoots. And so for lifestyle shoots, I always made a point in the first year of doing that was to have women as a part of that shoot as well as men. And there have actually been more than half of my shoots have had only women. And it was interesting because what happened is, even if I would show a wrist or I would show a glimpse or a vignette of a shot that was not just a man's wrist, all of a sudden this light bulb went off when I would talk to people, and it was like, "Oh, your watches aren't for men?" It's like, well, no, I don't actually say who they're for. They're for a person. They're not for a man, woman, or there's no profile. And what I found is within that first year of that formal shoot, I had more female customers. Now it represents about 15% of my business and growing. So, from the very beginning, and this is about 7 or 8 years ago, that was kind of a good reminder to me. And in my past life as kind of being a creative director and doing shoots and strategy and kind of having to kind of eat my own dog food, so to speak, I think it's really important for all brands to kind of have that reflection. But I found that in finding my customer and nurturing that customer, it's kind of like a garden. You have to have the right ingredients. You have to nurture it. You have to water it. And you have to be very mindful of what's in your garden. And I found that really great relationships have come from that. So, now more than half of my customers, I think I have some sort of ongoing relationship with. Maybe they order another watch in 10 years. Maybe it's a year, maybe it's a month. But for me, it's just about having that kind of discourse, that natural discourse. And I think a lot of brands, and even going to the whole moon swatch craze, the activity around that, both online, negative and positive, and it's just looking at kind of the conversation with the brand itself is really interesting because it created a fervor. And personally, I was there for the comments. Me and my popcorn. And I'm old enough to remember. I'm a Gen Xer. I remember when swatches first came out. So for me, it was a really interesting cycle because I remember being a teenager and lining up to collect that transparent swatch with the rubber band swatch protector. That was like coming full circle, seeing how a brand like that kind of going the high-low approach, which hasn't been in fashion for years, is that it's kind of brilliant in a lot of ways. So for me, discourse is healthy, even if there's some stumbling blocks along the way. So
Yeah. How many of you got a moon swatch, by the way? Just show of hands. Just Ricardo? Okay, we got a couple of them out there. Abingdon, you found an audience outside of traditional watch enthusiast channels, which I'm just fascinated by. Like, what are we missing? What are other watch brands missing by not actively being in these other spaces?
Well, a lot of fun. I mean, if you like adrenaline, then go race a Porsche around the Las Vegas Speedway. There's so many conversations that can be had with people that have no idea the difference between a mechanical, an automatic, and a quartz movement. And they don't care necessarily. And that's fine. Everybody wears watches for different reasons. And the thing that I think the watch industry, and maybe this was what I didn't know, so I just tripped myself into it, because when I started the brand, I was 22 years old. I was fresh out of college. I had never even worked at a company. So I just wanted a watch that I personally wanted. It was purely selfish reasons, really. And I knew that as a private pilot at the time, I needed to have a second time zone, or I needed to have a flight computer or a stopwatch, because these are the instruments that are in the flight deck. We now call them flight decks, not cockpits anymore. And that is just something that was an extension of my job, of the tool that I was flying. So that, to me, was what the watch was at the very beginning. Now it's completely evolved. But when I'm talking to new owners at these air shows or at these dive shows, they just want to make sure their watch doesn't flood. We had a customer who, she's like, do you have any that don't have batteries in it? Because every woman's dive watch that I find has a damn battery in it. And I have 2 calendars, one for my dive trips, and the other one is for my watches, because I have to go ship them off. They're gone for 2 months while they're getting serviced. And I have to time it with my trip, so I make sure I can bring a watch that I can take underwater. And I said, oh yeah, we've got 10 automatics right here. Which color do you want? And she was like, oh my gosh. Like, it was such a shock to her. And she'd been diving for, I think, around 30 years. She's an older woman. And I think she picked up 2 right there that went with her dive outfits. And that's another thing that I think the watch industry is trying to push a product in the way that they know it. And women buy watches in a very different way than men do. And they are trying to kind of create that same ecosystem sometimes. And unfortunately, it's usually as an afterthought. One of my favorite questions that I've been getting this week is, how are you guys doing this? This is incredible that you are selling this many watches to that many women. And you're really doing it without getting into the watch industry. And I was quite apprehensive to be at this show, only because I always saw all the online media, and it's like, wow, that's a lot of men there. I don't even know if I would really do well at this event. And are there any other female-focused brands? And not to say that we don't sell watches to men. There are a lot of men who wear an Abingdon watch. But what we're doing is we are specifically marketing to women because they are considered that afterthought. And if they are not treated that way, then they're not going to act that way. If somebody doesn't think, there's a good saying that one of my mentors told me one time, and you guys might be familiar with it. Nobody cares about you until you care about them. And if more brands remembered that about different communities in different countries, different age groups, different genders, even if you start going into just the demographics of socioeconomics, the poor, the middle class, the upper class, and you start to go with that idea of I need to care about them first before they're going to care what I'm doing, then not only are you going to teach yourself a lot, but you're going to be a lot more successful.
It goes to John's point as well. Representation is so important, and these are small things that I think a lot of brands might take for granted. I love where you went there too, because there's a lot of things that watch enthusiasts bicker about: specs, dates, complications, depth ratings that admittedly a lot of us aren't using at a time. So I like you're kind of from the other way around. Well, this is what I need. Do you have anything? Probably a healthy approach. But no, I think this is. You touched on some great points here that I think are really important. And what role we're going to get to a Q&A here just in just a second. But I just want to ask you each kind of what role do events like this play in connecting brands at large with kind of the community in a more healthy manner? Max, you want to start?
Sorry, I was still thinking about the last question. And just like, thinking about brands and the way that they treat collectors, and looking at these micro brands upstairs. I mean, these are guys who are collectors who are so passionate that they were like, I'm going to build my own watch, and I just think that's so kind of inspiring. But if we go to like the big brands and two kind of trajectories I've seen in the last couple of years that's been really dramatic and kind of antitheses of each other is looking at sort of how Rolex treated their customers and sort of what the enthusiast perception has been, and then contrasting that with Grand Seiko. And I really feel like the two have done a bit of a, inverse, chart in terms of how people feel about it. You can see this on the topics that come up on Watch Crunch. We have a guy right now who's doing a cool wall. And if you've ever seen the car show Top Gear back in the day, the British version, they had a running cool wall where they had 4 categories. It was like cool, uncool, I don't know, like vomit and
ice cold,
right? Yeah, a Sub-Zero, and just looking at how the enthusiasts view these brands, who whether they feel like that they're responsive to them, whether they take care of people when you go and spend thousands of dollars with them, right? It just shouldn't be your privilege to buy my watch, right? It should be my privilege to serve you, to give you, something to treasure. So I just wanted to kind of bring that up because it jogged my memory. But your question about events like this, I think it just, for me personally, it's been such an honor to meet these inspiring watchmakers and listening to their personal stories. And I've certainly, I've built Seikos. I've done my Seiko mods. I like to tease the Laurier guys and say I built a version like this, combining the broad arrow hand with the Explorer dial 3 years ago. Watch my video. But I think it comes from the same place, right? It comes from a place where we love this thing so much, and we think about it night and day. We wake up thinking about it, and we're like, man, wouldn't it be cool if you put those hands on that dial, right? So it's just nice to hear their personal journeys.
Yeah, I would say that events like Windup, right? The folks that come to this event and events like these are the lifeblood of the industry, right? Because buying a watch is a very personal and emotional decision. None of us need a watch, right? And so every time you purchase a watch, or you decide to wear a watch, it's very intentional, right? And when you provide an opportunity for folks that are that passionate and excited about these little things that we put on our wrists, the energy, right, is palpable. And this platform in particular, you're connecting folks like John, folks like Abingdon, with an opportunity to connect directly with folks who really care about what they're building. And my experience as a collector for over 15 years is more often than not, when I've had an opportunity to connect directly with the brand or the watchmaker themselves, I walk away feeling so much more enthusiastic about that brand and that watchmaker, right? And I can find something to attach to, right, in an emotional way where it's either the creative process behind how you design a watch, or the feedback that you leverage from your customers to determine like what functions you're going to bake into the next reference that you release, right? Like those are the kinds of experiences and interactions that I think create a lot of value, right, and make folks feel a lot more comfortable with parting ways with their money, right, to support your brand. And so, this is really where the rubber meets the road in my mind. It's not necessarily like the foot traffic going in and out of the ADs and the boutiques, but it's opportunities to connect directly with the people that are building the things that we love so much.
These are relationships at the end of the day that we're all fostering here. And I will say Abingdon's customers need many of us maybe don't need the depth rating and the time zone, but her customers are the exception there. With that, does anyone have any questions for Max, Abingdon, John, Jason here? Any final thoughts that you guys want to impart?
Just wanted to say that as this is the very first show that we've ever attended, being a watch show, I think what Worn and Wound is doing right is they are keeping the entry free. And that is one of the biggest things that the watch world, as you pointed out, they create this hidden barrier that really shouldn't be created. It's very self-destructive when you make it difficult, when you put watches under a glass case, when you have to pull out, the gloves to handle it, and you can't tell somebody to actually put it on, which is what one of the watch stores in Las Vegas told me one time. And so I love the fact that you can come to an event, walking right off the street, and find and connect with incredibly passionate people that know so much. I have learned so much. And being in this industry in 15 years, I figured I'd already learned a few things. No, I have learned so much from this industry in just the past 2 days. And that, for me, has been personally fulfilling. But then to also have those conversations with people that are connecting and building the relationships, and it's just accessible. And I think that's one thing that I love seeing what Worn and Wound is doing. I love seeing what Watch Crunch is doing, and just making it more accessible, approachable, and just like you're saying. I mean, just bringing people in that don't know that this industry is for them. And that's probably the greatest thing that I've seen out of this show, as compared to walking some of the shows in Europe or walking some of the shows in Vegas that have watches on display. So I can't thank you guys enough for putting on such an event.
Wouldn't do it without you guys. No, I appreciate it.
And I'll punctuate that because, I
Afterward.
totally agree. And I think the accessibility, it's scary to go up to a booth or to go up to any show and see a watch, pick up a watch. So I think the accessibility, the free, just come in, we're free to talk, touch the watches, try them on. But I think what's unique about what you guys have done is that it's a conversation, and that, including everyone. And also, we can't discount the fact that you have a lot of independent brands. We're connecting. So I kind of view us, we're stronger as a group, as a village. But a part of that village are the enthusiasts coming in. So I told someone yesterday, I said, it's like, the best analogy of this, it's like a family reunion where you find you have more cousins every day, whether they're other brands or there's someone from another country or they're new customers or there's people who are watch lovers. So it's kind of like this growing family reunion in a really weird way. So it's very inclusive, and I think that is really unique, and I think what's exciting is how that can be replicated online. As an extension of that.
Right. Yeah, to follow up on your point, it doesn't cost any money to use Watch Crunch, to go on the forums, to create an account. We don't run ads. We have no plans to run ads. And people are always like, well, like when are you going to monetize? We'll have to worry about that at some point. But right now we don't want to be scraping from our users, right? Like we want this to be as open and free as possible. We're talking about luxury things. We'll figure it out, right? But I think fostering the user base, really bringing people in, educating them. That's the main goal. Having people get together virtually or in person around this hobby, like that's the magic, and we need to focus on that.
I deeply appreciate the perspectives and knowledge that each of you have shared with us today. Thank you for all being here. If there's no other questions from the crowd, anybody have anything they want to ask?
Somebody's got to have a question. There's a lot of people in this room. Come on.
Bueller?
Nada? This guy's about to ask one back here, I can see. He's, yeah. All right. Well, what time? 1:45. All right. With
10:11. Oh, no.
Oh boy. With that, where can people find each of you, more of each of you? I'll roll the red carpet and you can.
Yeah, so you can find our community at www.complecto.co. It's not a .com. Somebody has the domain, is not using it, and wouldn't sell it to me. You can also find us on Instagram. It's Complecto, COMPLECTO_. And if anything that I've shared with you all resonates and you share our vision for a more diverse and inclusive community, we'd love to have you. We're your tribe. So I appreciate you sharing the platform. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm found at bespokewatchprojects.com, and also actively use Instagram a lot for my visual journal, what I'm working on. A lot of stuff doesn't end up on the website that I'm working on. Or you can always email me. I'm always happy to have a conversation.
You can find me right at the top of the stairs. So our booth is right across from the staircase. abingdonco.com and Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. We're pretty active on Clubhouse as well. So by all means, please connect.
You can check out watchcrunch.com for the forum. It's designed to run like an app, but the app is coming because there's been people banging down the doors for that. And I make watch YouTube videos also at WatchCrunch, where I play with a camera and a watch and lock myself in the basement. So check it out.
All right. Max, Abingdon, John, Jason, thank you so much. Let's hear it for our panelists, everybody.